Imagine waking up one day to find that your passport no longer guarantees your freedom. Closed bases, blocked borders, agents scrutinizing every photo on your phone. Places that yesterday promised adventure now whisper threats. From the deserts of Niger to the icy squares of Belarus, a network of countries is redefining risk for every American traveler. What triggered this brutal shift? What irreversible mistakes can be made with a single misstep? Today, we'll explore the 10 destinations where a smile can turn into a cell, and every decision could cost you far more than the trip. On the morning of March 5, 2024, a military statement shook the desert. The defense agreement with the United States was terminated, and the presence of over 1,000 troops was declared illegal. The antennas at the drone base in Agadez shut down one by one, their red lights fading under a dusty sky. Within hours, armored convoys headed for the border, escorted by wary glances and slogans demanding an end to foreign oversight. Resentment had been brewing since the fall of the regime in Mali and the advance of jihadism. Amid insecurity, the population saw that military aid neither stopped attacks nor curbed inflation. The junta capitalized on this discontent to present itself as a savior while courting Moscow and Beijing with promises of new trade routes and unconditional training. The message was clear. Niger decides its allies and the price. The consequences for U.S. passport holders are immediate and harsh. Residence permits are meticulously reviewed, work visas are delayed, armed patrols demand unlocked phones, and any photo of military infrastructure is deemed espionage. The official alert level has risen to the maximum, warning of arbitrary detentions that may persist without consular access. Humanitarian organizations report nighttime raids on aid workers' accommodations and prolonged interrogations seeking contacts and routes. The U.S. withdrawal leaves a massive strategic gap in regional security. Without the Agadez runway, surveillance flights over Mali, Burkina Faso, and Chad lose 2/3 of their coverage, according to the African Center for Strategic Studies. This blindness facilitates smuggling routes and allows new militias to exploit the void. The signal to the world is resounding. A state considered a key piece in Washington's counterterrorism architecture can close its doors and, in doing so, inspire others. Agadez, now cloaked in silence, becomes a symbol of the fragility of U.S. influence in West Africa. Under the yellow light of a sunset, the closed hangars remind us that sovereignty, combined with new alliances and popular pressure, can alter the global power map in days. Ignoring this lesson leaves one exposed to an unpredictable future. By the way, we've created the only travel guide that compiles proven strategies to optimize your budget, manage visas, and explore residence, job, and cultural opportunities abroad. With 7 volumes packed with practical tips and nearly 400 pages, it costs less than a Starbucks coffee. Hurry, because in a few days, we'll double the price. More info is in the community post, and I've left the link below. 9. Russia. Thick snow blankets Vyborg Station as border guards examine an American tourist's passport. 40 minutes of questioning, phone checks, and temporary laptop confiscation are enough to reveal the new climate. Every U.S. visitor is seen as a potential threat. The wall began in 2017 when the Kremlin forced Washington to cut over 700 consular staff. This was followed by the closure of the Vladivostok consulate, mirror sanctions, and the expulsion of 30 diplomats in 2022. After the Ukraine offensive, Moscow labeled U.S.-funded NGOs undesirable and made work visas nearly impossible. In January 2024, a New York newspaper reporter was detained in Yekaterinburg for espionage, transferred to Lefortovo with lights on 24/7 and filtered consular visits. Weeks later, 7 Vermont medical aid workers were expelled without appeal. A decree expanded the definition of espionage to include any data collection on military facilities. The repercussions are harsh. Random metro checks demand chat logs. Visa and MasterCard no longer work. ATMs limit foreign passport holders to $100 daily withdrawals. Direct flights to the West are suspended, and exits rely on connections through Istanbul or Dubai, which can close instantly. The State Department rates Russia at level 3, warning of arbitrary arrests and exit bans. Why this hostility? Moscow seeks technological autonomy and internal cohesion. Portraying Washington as a conspirator unifies public opinion and justifies controls over capital, the internet, and dissent. For the U.S., expulsions limit verification of strategic arsenals and cyber attack monitoring. For the average traveler, the country has become a legal maze where a social media comment can be deemed extremist propaganda. Under the domes of Red Square, tourism continues, under surveillance. Hotels report guests to FSB databases, and every Wi-Fi filters packets. Russia not only closes its physical doors, but raises digital and diplomatic firewalls as swiftly as snow covers cobblestones. Crossing that border is no longer a cultural excursion. It's a risk calculation where a mistake could mean months of detention and a silence no embassy can break. 8. China. At Shanghai Pudong's terminal, a sign warns of exit checks for foreign travelers. Guards seize phones from arrivals, and the line moves at a snail's pace. For years, China symbolized openness. Today, the door narrows, and every blue passport draws a suspicious glance. The shift began in 2019 when Beijing expelled 3 U.S. reporters for mentioning the Wuhan virus. Later, it imposed the national security law in Hong Kong, turning academic debates into potential subversion. University agreements froze, and Fulbright programs paused. In 2023, LinkedIn withdrew, and Microsoft relocated labs after censorship demands. In April 2024, the Foreign Expert Registry added fingerprints, DNA, and contact networks of hundreds of thousands of residents. A Chicago professor received an exit ban over a labor dispute and remains confined in a Suzhou hotel. Courts rule that sharing images of critical infrastructure equates to espionage. The impact on Americans is tangible. 10-year business visas have dropped to 90-day entries. Work permits require medical exams and political courses. Corporate files must be stored on monitored local servers. Tourists photographing bridges or shipyards may face hours of questioning. The State Department rates China at level 3, warning of arbitrary arrests and exit bans. Why this hostility? Beijing blends national pride, party control, and an existential technological rivalry. Portraying Washington as a containment force legitimizes data, capital, and speech controls. Every microchip is seen as a piece in a battle defining the century. The ripples are far-reaching. The U.S. loses access to labs and forums for soft intelligence. Investors fear anti-espionage inspections and retreat. For the average traveler, the Great Wall becomes a glass barrier. A sarcastic tweet, an undeclared drive, or a censored word can halt the adventure. Under the Bun's lights, the city still shines, but subway loudspeakers repeat, "National security is everyone's responsibility." U.S. arrivals have dropped by a third since 2022. 7. Iran. A routine dawn at Tahrir Square can turn into a nightmare. 2 plainclothes agents surround a Colorado tourist and lead her to a gray van without explanation. This scene, repeated at airports and bazaars, reflects the new norm for U.S. passport holders. The rift dates back to the 1979 embassy assault, cementing distrust no intermittent agreements could heal. The 2015 nuclear deal offered a glimmer, but Washington's 2018 withdrawal reignited tensions. Since then, Tehran has intensified interrogations, confiscated passports, and labeled academics as cultural spies. In July 2024, 3 Arizona backpackers were detained for flying a recreational drone. In autumn, Parliament tightened security laws, punishing collaboration with foreign media as conspiracy. The judiciary admits over 50 foreigners, many with dual citizenship, remain under investigation without reliable consular access. The repercussions for travelers are severe. Journalist visas are nearly extinct. Business visas require recorded interviews and invasive medical exams. Upon arrival, a mandatory SIM card routes calls through Revolutionary Guard servers. Hotels report guest lists to police daily. The State Department rates Iran at level 4, warning of prolonged arrests and indefinite exit bans. Why this suffocating climate? The government views sanctions as undeclared war. Detaining U.S. citizens serves as leverage for economic relief and showcases internal strength. Rivalry with Israel and Saudi Arabia reinforces the narrative of a permanent Western plot. The impact extends beyond borders. Humanitarian organizations suspend projects, universities cancel scholarships, and energy firms halt studies in southern fields. For the average traveler, the Republic is a maze. An ironic tweet, a mural photo, or a banknote with the Ayatollah's image can trigger hours of questioning. Under Isfahan's turquoise domes, beauty persists, but subway loudspeakers declare security a religious duty. In Iran, a mistake isn't measured in minutes, but in years of irreversible silence. 6. North Korea. Crossing the Friendship Bridge from Dandong, an American backpacker hands over their passport and loses control of it. The document passes through military hands, is photocopied, translated, and returned marked. From that moment, every step is watched. This is how any visit to the Hermit Kingdom begins today. The tension's roots traced to the 1950s war never closed with a peace treaty. A brief thaw came with the 2018 Singapore summit, but it faded when nuclear talks collapsed. Since then, Pyongyang shut the Inter-Korean Liaison Office, cut the UN Command hotline, and expelled foreign inspectors. Recent evidence is telling. This winter, the Swedish protecting embassy relocated an American visitor accused of leaving a Bible in a market. Weeks later, 2 local guides were detained after speaking with California journalists. The regime bans GPS devices and deems photographing infrastructure a conspiracy. Internal reasons, fear of cultural revolution, sanctions pressure, and the need to project strength, drive this. For the Workers' Party, every detained foreigner is a bargaining chip for economic relief or political recognition. Consequences for blue passport holders are stark. There's no U.S. embassy in Pyongyang. The nearest legation in Beijing takes weeks to relay messages. A visitor can be arrested for removing a poster or joking about the ruling family. Curfews apply, and luggage is searched before departure. The State Department rates it at the highest alert level, warning of forced labor and trials without guarantees. Globally, the lack of diplomatic access hampers Washington's ability to monitor missiles and aid citizens. For the international community, the superpower appears powerless in a hermetic state. For tourists, North Korea is a mirror where curiosity costs freedom. Every minute signs an implicit contract accepting rules that shift without notice. At Pyongyang Station, a metallic loudspeaker announces a train with no visible destination. Its echo reverberates over gray marble, reminding all that here, a mistake doesn't last seconds. It lasts lifetimes. 5. Turkey fog blankets Istanbul's airport as a Seattle engineer hands over his passport. The official examines it, signals, and leads him to a windowless room. For 3 hours, he's questioned about contacts and political views. Upon leaving, he discovers his phone was cloned. This scene, repeated among travelers, reflects Turkey's new reality. Once a showcase of the Atlantic Alliance, Ankara is now dominated by suspicion. The failed 2016 coup sealed the rift when the government accused the U.S. of shielding the implicated cleric. Sanctions for buying Russian missiles and Syria clashes further strain ties. Alerts are rising. A North Carolina pastor spent nearly 2 years in prison before being swapped. New York reporters were detained for photographing a barracks. In spring 2024, a court expelled a human rights researcher, and police shut down a Boston-funded NGO. Political and economic motives lurk behind each detention. The government bolsters its electoral base by showing defiance to the West, and uses foreign citizens as chips to negotiate drone sales or sanctions relief. Meanwhile, the lira devalues, and the external conspiracy narrative diverts domestic unrest. Consequences for U.S. passports are clear. Press visas are nearly extinct, and tourist visas are scrutinized individually. Anti-terror laws allow 2-day detentions without charges. Hotels and operators report guest data and calls to the ministry daily. The State Department warns of arbitrary arrests and exit bans. Strategically, this drift erodes a NATO pillar. Restricted access to Incirlik base complicates Middle East air support. Defense firms review contracts, and airlines plan routes amid potential airspace closures. For travelers, what was a destination of bazaars and mosques becomes a stage where a critical tweet can open a legal case. On Galata's rooftop, dusk paints the Bosphorus copper red, but a rumor ripples through tea houses. Courtesy now depends on the political compass. Crossing the suspension bridge means knowing that in today's Turkey, hospitality is granted, monitored, and revoked without notice. Prudence is the greatest safeguard. 4. Venezuela. Maiquetia's dense heat envelops a Texas technician. 2 guards separate him, inspect his blue passport, and warn without a smile that all devices will be checked. This is how every U.S. arrival begins today. Caracas and Washington once shared a petroleum marriage, fractured when Hugo Chavez accused the White House of backing the 2002 strike. Nicolás Maduro inherited that distrust and made it state policy. In January 2019, he broke ties after U.S. recognition of Juan Guaidó and ordered the embassy closed. The last protective link snapped. Events tightened the rope. That year, 6 Citgo executives were convicted of embezzlement without public evidence. 2 former Green Berets received life sentences in 2022 for a failed incursion. This spring, a Latino reporter was held 4 days for filming gas queues. Local NGOs count over 30 Americans detained since 2017. Why this treatment? Oil sanctions choke revenue, and each detained foreigner becomes a bargaining chip for relief or swaps. It also bolsters the resistance narrative and aligns Caracas with Moscow and Beijing. Immediate consequences. Level 4 travel alert. No direct flights since 2020, scarce work visas, and filmed interviews. Military checkpoints copy phone contacts, and foreign card payments can freeze. Consular access is remote, and trials can drag on for years. The U.S. footprint fades. Without an embassy, no one closely monitors Russian advisors' arrivals or gold shipments to Tehran. Gulf refineries pay for costlier alternative crude. The diplomatic void deepens the erosion of U.S. regional leadership. For the average traveler, Venezuela is a board where a sarcastic tweet, a refinery photo, or a human rights questionnaire can trigger an arrest without end. Gas shortages and blackouts turn every trip into an endurance test. At night, illuminated posters on Bolivar Avenue hide the warning whispered mouth to mouth. A visitor's freedom lasts as long as the government needs another chip for its global game. Since flight cancellations in 2020, U.S. visits have dropped nearly 2/3. 3. Cuba. At José Martí Terminal, an agent collects blue passports and guides 2 travelers to a windowless room. The rest are required to declare phones and explain every file. This scene sums up the reception awaiting most U.S. citizens. Havana and Washington endured decades of embargo post-1959. The 2014 thaw opened an embassy and cruises, but the subsequent reversal reinstated restrictions. In 2022, Cuba remained on the terrorism sponsor list, and dialogue channels paused. Today, the consulate operates with minimal staff, and visas must be processed in Guyana. After mysterious health incidents, diplomatic offices and homes were sealed. The list of hotels and agencies tied to the military expanded, and Northern bank cards stopped working at local terminals. Airlines cut frequencies to the capital and canceled provincial routes. Recent data heightens the alarm. The State Department rates Cuba at level 3, citing risks of neurological symptoms. Exiles report over 30 nationals questioned since the summer 2021 protests. The central bank limits ATM withdrawals to about $100 daily, and tour agencies estimate U.S. visitor arrivals fell 2/3 since 2019. Caution. The government cites defense against financial strangulation. Restricting dollar flows and foreign lodging bolsters the besieged fortress narrative and shrinks space for critical voices. Traditional tourism remains banned. Travel is allowed only under 12 strict categories, and every expense must be documented to avoid federal penalties upon return. ATMs reject Northern bank cards, and cash is limited. Staying in banned hotels incurs fines, and departures can be delayed by searches for drives and pamphlets. The near-empty embassy hampers monitoring of Mariel port modernization, where Russian ships dock regularly, and limits support for private entrepreneurs reliant on remittances. Each canceled flight reinforces the regional impression of a Washington unable to influence or protect its citizens. Under the Malecone's lampposts, the salty breeze murmurs a warning. In today's Cuba, every smile can turn into an inquiry, and every photo is proof of covert intent. 2. Afghanistan. Kabul's runway lies empty as a Taliban guard brusquely seizes a Colorado aid worker's blue passport. No stamps, no smiles, just a vague promise of review. This is how every U.S. arrival begins today. For decades, Washington and Kabul cycled through intervention and disillusionment. After the Taliban's fall in 2001, bases, drones, and billions in funds arrived. It all crumbled in August 2021 when evacuation helicopters departed and the Eagle's flag was folded. The new emirate voided Doha agreements, closed the Human Rights Commission, and revoked diplomatic visas. NGOs must disclose routes and cannot hire women. 2 New York documentarians were detained in Herat for flying drones and released after exorbitant payments. For the Taliban, every northern citizen is a bargaining chip for sanctions relief and reserve unlocking. They also blame Washington for the crisis emptying markets and forcing families to sell belongings. Consequences are extreme. With no embassy, there's no assistance. A phone with offline maps can lead to espionage charges. Checkpoints inspect photos. Flights arrive only via Doha or Islamabad and can be canceled without notice, trapping travelers. Recent data reinforces the alarm. The State Department rates Afghanistan at level 3, citing risks of neurological symptoms. Exiles report over 30 nationals questioned since the summer 2021 protests. The central bank limits ATM withdrawals to about $100 daily, and tour agencies estimate U.S. visitor arrivals fell 2/3 since 2019. Caution. The forced exit slashed Washington's ability to monitor ISIS Khorasan, forcing reliance on satellites and regional allies. Mining projects lost escorts, and lithium rights are now discussed with Beijing. Each week without presence strengthens the image of an absent superpower. In Kandahar, a blue passport is as rare as snow. Among the graffiti-covered walls of the former embassy, welded doors rust under a merciless sun. The wind stirs dust and memories of broken promises. Crossing these mountains today means knowing every minute can shift from awe to captivity. Silence, dust, uncertainty. 1. Belarus. Icy mist cloaks the Brest crossing. 2 agents with red armbands board the train from Warsaw and demand passports. Spotting an Ohio traveler's blue one, they lead him behind a metal door. No explanation, no clear record. This is how a U.S. citizen's stay in the ex-Soviet Republic begins today. The hostility didn't emerge overnight. After the mass protests of August 2020, Minsk accused Washington of funding a color revolution. A month later, it expelled the ambassador and slashed diplomatic staff. U.S. sanctions on potash and derivatives pushed the government closer to Moscow, adopting a besieged fortress narrative. Deterioration piled up relentlessly. In spring 2023, a Vermont cultural center was shuttered, and several health NGOs were declared undesirable. In autumn, police arrested a Chicago reporter covering strikes, charging her with extremism. From the Independence Palace's perspective, the reasons are clear. Belarus needs to show absolute loyalty to the Kremlin post-Ukraine invasion. Punishing Western voices and using foreigners as bargaining chips against Brussels and Washington strengthens the external conspiracy narrative and offers future swaps. Direct consequences. The embassy operates with a skeleton crew, handling emergencies only via encrypted email. Business visas require KGB-vetted invitations. Hotels report guests twice daily, and police can inspect phones on the street. Photographing factories or carrying a rainbow flag can lead to propaganda charges. The diplomatic void clears the way for smuggling networks crossing borders to Kaliningrad and Donbass. Analysts note NATO loses visibility on its eastern flank. For travelers, Belarus is a glass trap. An ironic comment or recreational drone can land you in a military court. Under the pale lights of Victory Square, marble gleams as loudspeakers blare patriotic marches. The echo repeats a message. Visits are welcome only if they serve the state's script. Crossing this threshold means counting your words, measuring your steps, and assuming the line between tourist and hostage is penciled on unforgiving ice. In Minsk, courtesy lasts a fleeting frosty breath.